G'day everyone, in this video I'm going to take you through the 12 mistakes that I made producing 12 feature films. And I want to take you through these mistakes so that you can avoid them ahead of time and so you don't have to go through the pain that I went through making these mistakes. Make sure you stick around until the end because I've got some tips of how you can overcome these mistakes and how you can better prepare your production in order to have a seamless experience and a seamless journey getting the film from development through to release. All right, so let's dive in. First mistake that I made was to get involved in a feature film as a co-producer, so in a co-production. Our company was co-producing with another company, but where I had no access to or control over the special purpose vehicle, so the company that was set up to actually produce the film. Now, why was this a mistake? Well, ultimately it was a mistake because it meant that I was not able to really have any decision-making authority over key financial decisions. And because I was heavily involved in the financing of the film and I was leveraging a lot of my own contacts in order to finance this film, it really put me in a scenario where I was at the mercy of the other producer. Now, the film went fine in the end. You know, like we finished the film, the film's been released, it's all good. But there were kind of key decisions along the way that if I had access to the SPV, if I had more decision-making authority, I think I would have been able to manage the process better, and it would have given my partners, my contacts, probably just more comfort and more confidence that in the end everything was going to turn out okay. And like I said, it did, but I think I don't want to put myself in a position again where that happens. And so the lesson for me was, if I'm co-producing and I'm getting involved in a project to that level, then I want to make sure that I have access to and control over the special purpose vehicle. So if you don't know what a special purpose vehicle is, it's basically just a company that gets set up to specifically produce that film. So it's separate to your production company that might own the rights to the film. It's a topic for another video, but for now it's just good to know that you should have control and access to that. The second mistake is allowing crew to invest their gear so their gear for free, or to invest cash into the film. And the reason that this has been a mistake that I've made is that, often that when you're producing a film, when you're financing your film, you're trying to do anything and everything that you can to get it financed. And so if you have this opportunity to get cash from a crew member and they're willing to put it in, or if they're willing to just, give their gear as in-kind support, you want to take that because you're trying to get the film financed. What happens though, or what can happen, is that if there are any disagreements or disputes, or just, films are tough to make. So there could just be friction at some point of time with that crew member. And if they are invested in the project more than they should be through gear, through cash, it can just create a more difficult kind of scenario that you need to work through. So again, in my personal experience, everything turned out okay in the end, but it caused a lot of unnecessary stress during the production that I think could have been avoided if we simply didn't have that situation. So what I'm suggesting here is, if you can avoid having equipment provided for free, it's better to simply just pay for that, or maybe pay a reduced rate. And if someone's willing to invest in the film, rather than have them, so this is a crew member, if they're willing to invest, rather than have them invest cash up front, another way that you can do it is they can get paid their fee in full, and then they can invest part of that fee back into the film. And I think it's just it's just less messy. I think when you have someone really putting too much into the project, it can create some extra stress that you don't need. The third one is that it's really important that the crew members that you're hiring have recorded experience in the role that they're being hired for, and at the same scale as the project that you're producing. So if you're hiring a crew member, you want to look at their CV and their resume and make sure that they have experience in the role that you're hiring them for. If you're making a feature film, it needs to be in the same role on a feature film at the same scale. So if you're making a $3 million film and they've only worked on a $100,000 film, that's not the same scale. And this is something that took probably 4 films for us to start getting right. And it was really on that 4th film where we made some bad hiring decisions that we kind of really had to learn this lesson. And again, so what really ended up happening on set is just we needed to replace that person. So we put them in another role because they just weren't up to the task. We had to bring someone else in to fulfill that role. And so number one is like, it's just not fair on that crew member. And the second thing is it's obviously creating all this additional stress and time when you're actually in production, because you don't really know that you've made a bad hiring decision until you're on set. And so you're then having to make decisions really quickly. They're not easy decisions to make. They can affect morale on set. And so if you can just get the hiring process right up the front end and make sure you're hiring people with the experience in the right role, then you can avoid that. And then when you get to set, you can actually just focus on creating a really great culture and a really great experience for everyone. Number 4 is that distribution must be locked in during financing. Now, again, this is something that I've learned over time, and I think it's important for me to just jump in here and say, like, these are mistakes that I've made, and now these are things that we avoid doing going forward. But you might be right at the start of your filmmaking journey, or you might just be making your first feature film or second feature film. And so sometimes it's also not possible to implement some of these mistakes. So for example, something I've learned now that I'll do on all my films going forward is distribution must be locked in during the financing stage. We don't want to move a film into production unless we have distribution already locked in. The reason we don't want to do that is twofold. We don't want to get to the end of the film and have a finished product and then realize that there's no audience for it. And the other reason is that when you attach distributors to your film during financing, it's really the first time that your film has been tested. It's the first time you've really stress tested the film in the marketplace. It's the first time you've gone out to someone that's not a private investor, right? And you said, will you put money into this film? Do you see potential, market potential, commercial potential in this film? That's really what you're doing at that stage. And I think it's important to do that because it gives you a really accurate read on the potential of your film. And if you don't do that, then you're really waiting to get to the end of the production until you know that. And that's risky. You're putting a lot of money at risk when you could be de-risking that right at the top end. So again, this might not be possible for you if it's your first film or maybe your second film, but I would encourage you to try and attach distribution. I would encourage you to try and attach a sales agent during financing. If you ultimately can't, then it's really your decision about whether you want to move that film into production. Like if everyone says no, then it is a good opportunity to pause and say, like, is this the right film? Like, should we really be moving this thing into production? You might decide that it still is. And so, that could just be because you want to get a film under your belt. You may want to still go through the experience of production. But it's worth noting that, you could get to the end and again, there's no home for the film and it's going to be very difficult for you to return money to the investors. The 5th mistake is that is really not putting the script through some sort of formal creative development process and really interrogating it. And so particularly, when I think for me personally, when I was starting out, like even just my knowledge of development and screenwriting was pretty low. Especially me, I never went to film school, so I never learnt this stuff. I was really just learning it as I went. But as I made more films, the importance of the script really became more and more and more apparent. And so now with all the films that we produce, even the films that we executive produce, where we're really just coming on board to help finance the film, even those films, we now put them through a development process. We want to make sure that there is time, there is effort, there is knowledge, there is expertise being put into the development process in order to make sure that the script is the absolute best that it can be. Because if there are mistakes in the script, if there are like issues in the script, there's still going to be issues at the end. You can't overcome those issues in the script. The only place you can really overcome them is in the script. So that's something that we've really learned and have implemented at the company. I think something that's really important as like a base level, again, if you're in those early stages, is that you should really be able to articulate, or the writer should be able to articulate the premise of the film, and they should be able to articulate just some basic screenwriting like 101s or foundations. So they should be able to articulate like the key tent poles, the key turning points of the film. They should be able to articulate the premise. So like, what are they trying to say through this film? And then you should be able to have a discussion about whether that's actually being realized in the script. What I find with a lot of scripts is that actually the premise is there. What the filmmaker wants to say is clear, but it's just not being realized in the script. They think it's being realized, but it's just not there. And so really that just takes conversations. And I think the best thing that you can do when you're developing a script is just ask questions. Like if you're not the screenwriter, you're working with the screenwriter, maybe you're producing the film, the best thing that you can do is just ask questions. Because really what you want more than anything is to see that they have clarity in their mind, that they are able to articulate these things to you. And I think when that happens, then you have confidence that they know what they're doing, and B, that is apparent in the script. This is a bit of a follow-on from the last one, and it is pretty basic, but I think it's overlooked, is just to make sure the script is checked for industry formatting, so that the shooting script is optimized for production. So we had a film where this wasn't the case, and it just got to the point where we were working with a production service company, and because the script wasn't really formatted as a shooting script, it just then created like extra work. We need to go back into the script, do all this formatting, and it just slowed the process down a little bit. So that was a relatively easy one to learn, but again, it's really important. And something I'll just add, this is like a little side note, is that if you are writing a script, particularly if you're a writer-director, don't include any camera cues, don't include any like music, don't include actors' names. That stuff, it shouldn't be in a script. And if you send that out to industry people like sales agents or distributors, it's just not going to read well. They're going to see that actually it's not like it's not at the professional level that it should be. So it's fine if you want to have your own script where those things are in there so that you have them, but then you should create another script that you can send out to those types of companies. Next one, I think we're up to number 7 here. So it's that films should fit within, or should fit in your overall company mission. So whether it's a company or maybe you're just a filmmaker, you should try and get clear on the types of films that you want to make, and then try and be actually making those films. So I think this is something that for us as a company, we probably weren't as firm on, I would say, as we started to scale up our productions. And it's not that it's not like a fatal mistake to make. But I think if you can be in the marketplace and you can have a really clear brand, if you can have a really clear kind of mission and films that you make, that's really beneficial, because then when filmmakers are looking at the types of projects that you make, or if you're a filmmaker, right, and producers are looking at your types of films, if it's really varied, that can be a little bit confusing. And so I think that as much as you can, obviously there's an imperative to make films, to keep producing films. But as much as you can, if you can stick to that brand and that mission, I think that there are greater benefits to doing that. Next one is that you want to be in a position, whether it's your production company or you as an individual, to go all in on a film with your resources. So like with your capital and with your time. And so this was, again, something that we learned really as we scaled up and we started doing multiple productions. It just meant that we were stretched a little bit thin. And so it was a drain on company capital and it was a drain on resources. And I think ultimately each film didn't get as much attention as it probably should have. And so that was a really good lesson for us to learn, because it just meant that like the following year, we just scaled everything back, right? So instead of trying to do multiple productions, we just stuck to one. And that allowed us the time to spend on the project, to spend during development, to spend more time during financing, to be there during production, to be there during post when we needed to be there. And then ultimately to also have the company capital to be able to, manage the cash flow as the film was being produced. Sometimes when you're producing a film, you need extra cash, right? You have the finance, but cash comes in at different points in time. And so if you have your company being able to support the production as it goes through, that just makes the process a lot easier. So being well capitalized and having the resources to spend on the film, I think is really important. It allows you to go all in. Next one. So we're up to number 9. I learned that you not only have to assess the opportunity or the potential of a film, but you also have to assess the opportunity cost of a film. So there are some films that are just going to require more time. They're going to require more resources. They're going to require you to do things that are out of your typical competency, or maybe just even beyond the scope of what you usually do. And so it's really important, I think, particularly when you have multiple projects that you're assessing in terms of which one you're going to get involved in, to try and look at the opportunity cost. And so what I mean by that is just, if you decide to do this particular film and because of the time and the resources that it's going to take, what are the opportunities that you're then missing out on? Is there another film that could come and fill that gap that would be easier to produce or require less resources, or maybe the scope is more narrow, right? Which means it's, again, just it requires less time and resources. What are those opportunity costs for you? And it's hard to know this, it's hard to really quantify this. And so what you really just have to look at, I guess, more than anything, is what are your fees on the project? What is the profit margin that you'll be making on that particular project? And then what is the likely amount of time that you're going to spend? I think it's hard to put a number on that. And so I would be thinking about, is it going to require more time than usual? Is it outside scope? Is it outside of my core competency? And if it is all of those things, then you should look at, well, what is the real opportunity you make? Are there some other benefits I'm going to get from making this film? Maybe it's some sort of relationship that you're going to form that's going to be really beneficial for you long term. So that would make you go into it. But if those things don't exist, then again, you might look at it and go, well, it's going to create this big opportunity cost because I'm going to be sucked into this project. I'm going to be spending a lot of time on it, and then I'm not really going to have time to do anything else. So that's something that we now, I think, are just getting better at assessing projects and trying to look at, all the relevant factors. And I have done a video on this where I take you through what those criteria are. And so you can check that out here. But that's really important to have a look at as well. Not just the opportunity of it, but the potential opportunity cost. Next one is, what are we up to? Number 10. So good one to do is to carefully examine any of your partners' track records and reputation. So you really want to look at any of your core suppliers, any of the producers or EPs that you're teaming up with, obviously co-producers, directors, writers, heads of department, just you want to do a little bit of background work on the people that you're getting into bed with, and particularly like those relationships that are like that, where it is more of a partnership or a strategic partnership maybe. You just want to make sure that you've done that homework. And if there are any red flags, if someone gives you a red flag, maybe you're like doing a bit of background, someone gives you a red flag, and it doesn't have to be a huge red flag. It can just be like they're not quite sure, or maybe, like something has just come up for them. Then usually that would be a reason like not to get involved in that project or not to work with that person. And so I think because the film industry is a small industry, you are able to do this, right? You're able to speak to other filmmakers that have worked with the distribution company or the sales agency or the producer and get an idea really about that person's track record and their reputation. And then that will allow you to make a better decision about whether you want to work with them. Next one is, so going back to production here. So it's really getting proper feedback in the edit. So the edit is, as I say, the third time the film is made, right? And it is, I think, a really important part of the production process. And so similar to development, where you want to have a clear process for getting feedback, you want to be able to interrogate the script. During the edit, you want to be able to interrogate the edit. And you want to have a specific process in place to review the film and people involved with doing that. So we've now, like the last film that we've made, we had, let me just think, 2 internal screenings, like where we really just, we invited people that we knew, like industry people whose opinions that we trusted, and we got them into a cinema. We watched the film with them. We got feedback. We did an open discussion. We did rounds of feedback with like producer notes. So we probably did like 2 or 3 of those. And then we hired a company to do an external screening of the film. So we hired a cinema, got like 150 people, members of the public. We were able to like make that quite targeted in terms of the target audience that we were going after for the film. They did like a full-blown survey. They did a focus group afterwards. So we now are at the point where we're really trying to get as much feedback as we can during the edit. And obviously when we started, it was nothing like this. Like the first film, it was probably just me, the 2 co-directors, maybe a couple mates gave us feedback, and like that was it. But again, just because of the importance of storytelling and the fact that a lot of storytelling happens in the edit, it is another area where you just want to make sure that you're getting enough feedback in order to make the film the best that it can be. So yeah, for now, like for us, it's like 2-3 rounds of feedback from producers, 2-3 internal reviews, and then 1 full-blown external review. And then just staying on the edit, the last one, so last mistake that we made that we've now learnt from is really just giving the edit the proper time that it needs. So in the past, I think I have absolutely been guilty of having strict deadlines and strict timelines in order, for example, to try and hit like a festival date. This in particular, I think, is something that I learnt on a documentary film that we produced. And it was just that, this is me personally, so this is totally my mistake, was really to, just focus on this timeline, this almost arbitrary timeline. Like obviously we're trying to hit a festival submission date, but that date's not more important than making a great film. And so, really the thing that I learned there is that you need to give the edit time. You need to give the director who's just been through pre-production and production and now they're in the edit, like they are cooked by the end of the edit. They are absolutely wrecked. And so you want to make sure that you've just got enough time in that edit period that it's not so overwhelming for them, so stressful for them that they're not able to make good decisions, they get decision fatigue, and you just want to make sure, again, you have enough time to do these reviews as you're going, and just that you're not rushing that edit. I, obviously still believe in deadlines. I still always try and like have the film on on a timeline, like always working towards a date. But I think now the lesson that I've learned is that I need to be more flexible there, and that always the film comes first. So that's it.